Well, it's the day after President Obama has won another 4 years. Democrats savor the victory while Republicans regroup and plot out new tactics. Joining us today are Republican analyst John Tiene and Democratic analyst Yohuru Williams. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on board, and it's always good to have you. Let me ask you first your thoughts on how the election went. Was it what you expected, or did you see any surprises? John, I'll ask you first.
It really, at the end of the day, it wasn't a big surprise when you start to look at the numbers. It was interesting. Romney criticized Obama for hopey-changey, but Romney's campaign, a lot of it was based on hope. And the Obama campaign was just an excellent tactical campaign. I mean, they defined Romney early on, they rebuilt their coalition, and then they executed. Mm-hmm. And I think the Republicans have to go back and look at how are we going to win nationally, given the fact that the nation has changed over the last 12 years demographically. Much different. And Romney ran an old campaign. He ran an 80s campaign. He was relying on white male voters to get him in. Mm-hmm. There's just less white males than there were 12 years ago. Yeah,
in addition to the demographics, Yohuru, let me ask you this. Because we had such a split vote, does this suggest that there were some serious weaknesses in the president's policies that he's going to have to address in these next 4 years?
Absolutely, Brian, and I think the president needs to take this moment and seize this opportunity really to lead, something he didn't do very effectively in 2008. So he has, while I wouldn't call it a mandate, certainly a charge. You know, 303 electoral votes is a pretty good indication that the country is behind him, so he's got to take that and lead, run with that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. We saw the Republican Party in the beginning of the last administration. Mitch McConnell came out and said, we're going to make him a one-term president, and the obstruction clouded all 4 years. Do they have that luxury this time around?
I don't think so. I think they may try. I mean, I'm already hearing Speaker Boehner's going to have a news conference this afternoon. He's going to say, hey, Congress got reelected. That means we can't raise taxes. Something's got to give. They've got to come together. These issues are too big, and I think that's one reason Obama may reach out to Romney and kind of maybe use Romney as an ambassador. Mm-hmm. They've got to start working together to solve these problems, because if they can't, you've got this fiscal cliff that's coming up in, what, 2 months?
2 months, end of the year.
I couldn't agree with you more, John. I think that is, if it might be a bit artificial, but it certainly is one of these things that's going to drive conversations and drive Republicans and Democrats to get to the table, because this ultimately will impact our global standing as well.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a couple of key states: Florida, Ohio, Virginia. Were you surprised at all at the way they went? And we were looking at Florida last night saying, what?
Well, I just think this goes to the execution by the Obama campaign. They ran an excellent campaign. They executed, they rebuilt their coalition, and they got their people out. Look at Ohio, a traditional Midwestern industrial state that should be Republican. While people, and I think Ohio's a good case, people were kind of upset, maybe a little disillusioned with Obama, but they didn't trust Mitt Romney. Yeah. And so they gave the president another 4 years and give him another chance. He won in a state where he shouldn't be winning.
Same reaction, and I think this is the second election in a row where we've seen the Democrats really take advantage of some unique, innovative techniques in terms of campaigning. We saw this with social media in 2008. Now it was the ground game. And I think the Republicans, if they don't want to run the risk of becoming a regional party, have to look very hard at some of these innovations and apply them coming up. And that begins literally now. So, it's one thing to criticize the president and talk about what they're going to do in terms of obstruction. Another thing to look at what the Dems did well and say, we've got to pursue that as a strategy.
The Republicans can't keep running old white guys. They have to broaden that base of the party. They've got to start bringing more Latinos and Hispanics and really broaden their party. If not, they're going to be regionalized, they're going to be marginalized.
You know what's interesting? George W. Bush
That's right.
was very successful in bringing in huge numbers of Latinos into the Republican Party. It looked like that was where they were going to make the shift, and it just kind of
instead of shifting more moderate, they shifted way right, and you can see the result here. They picked up a couple of seats, a couple of governor seats in a couple of states, but if you really dig into numbers, the Republicans need to make a shift. People, particularly younger voters, more moderate voters, those who define themselves as independent, they just are not comfortable with the far-right Republican ideology.
Right.
And people traditionally have historically voted in three ways: identity, interest, and values. Yeah. We're now in a society, I believe, where people are starting to look more at values. And so, you know, imagine if someone like Barack Obama had run earlier in the decade, we might have seen a very different reaction to him. Colin Powell, had he been the first African-American president, would have had a very different reaction than Barack Obama for obvious reasons, because there's a values difference that people are looking at and evaluating, even though Colin Powell endorsed Barack Obama. But I agree with John. These things are literally changing the political landscape, and the Republican Party, no party can take for granted any longer those old political alliances.
Younger voters who don't participate in a mainstream religion. They don't go to a religious place every Sunday, but they still have religious beliefs. They viewed Romney as extreme because of the beliefs he was putting out there that were reflected in the base of the Republican Party. If the Republicans want younger voters to come into their party, more moderate, they're going to have to move a little bit away from the right in these extreme social issue positions. Yeah, it's driving people away from them. You know, I think the president realizes this was not an overwhelming mandate. This was a well-executed campaign. They defined their opponent early. People didn't like Romney, and so they kind of gravitated back to the president. They felt comfortable with the president, and they gave him another 4 years. It's not a resounding mandate, but clearly he showed he can run a campaign. They didn't trust the other guy more. Right. So here we go.
Let me ask you this. If you're both in the circle with the president the day after, you're plotting out the next 4 years, what does he have to do to bring the Republicans on board? Let me go back to when he first got elected in 2008. One of his first things was to try to reach out, and each time he reached out, he seemed to draw back a nub, and it got a little more intense to the point where his own party members were saying, forget about that, let's see what we can do on our own. How does he handle that this time around?
He clearly, I think, has to find moderate Republicans that he can work with. It's going to be tough. There are still Tea Partiers in Congress who they believe that, you know, that they're right. They've got to look at these election results and realize they don't necessarily reflect the broad base of American thought. And you need to find a way. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but the president's really going to have to work at it hard. He's going to have his party kind of come even a little further into the center to take the edge off, and he's going to have to find folks to work with. And he's got to start today. And Mitt Romney may be that ambassador to help him do that.
I couldn't agree more. And he also needs to be very upfront about what his agenda is. Put that on the table and move aggressively. He's got 4 years. One of the benefits he has now is not worrying about re-election. In 2 years, the Dems will have to worry about, in general, about who will be their next candidate. But Obama really has the opportunity now to take these first 2 years before he's a lame duck, in effect, and do some things that really will define his legacy. So he's got to, I agree with John again, think very concretely in the next 6 weeks, what is it that I hope to accomplish? What can I do while I have this opportunity?
He's got to allow Republicans to have something that they can say that they got. So if he wins this election by 55 points or 53 points nationally, then the Republicans, he's got to have 50, 60% of a Democratic solution. He's got to allow the Republicans to have a 40, 45% part of that solution.
All right, well, we started a little bipartisanship here. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming on board and talking to us. And we will see what happens.